All right, the Sparta Board of Education regular meeting is called to order at 7:02 PM. Wendy, can you read the meeting announcement, please? Sorry, I caught you off guard.
Yeah, no, it's okay. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Sparta Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be advertised by having the date, time, and place thereof posted at the Sparta Board of Education office, 18 Mohawk Avenue, as designated by the Board of Education for posting of such notice in a public place. A written notice was emailed on January 11th, 2022 to the New Jersey Herald, the Star Ledger, tapintosparta.net, and to the Township clerk specifying the date, time, and place of this meeting.
Thanks, Wendy. Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier,
Here.
Ms. Grano, Ms. McKernan,
Here.
Ms. Miller,
Here.
Mr. Morris,
Here.
Ms. Sealander,
Here.
Dr. Serrano, Mr. Palesci.
Here. Thank you. Will everybody please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance? This way now. Thank you. Before we move on, I just want to thank everybody for your participation and being here tonight, and also whoever is out there attending virtually. We got a nice change of scenery here. I've never been on the board, to be here at a meeting. I'm actually on the board, but it sounds like everybody's pretty happy to be back. So thank you all for being here. Before we move on, we do want to observe a moment of silence. As I'm sure you're all aware, the district suffered a tragic loss with the loss of Mrs. Shepard. So please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. Let's see, we're going to move on, right on to our presentations for the evening. I know Dr. Beck and Mrs. Rossi have a presentation for us tonight.
Yes. Good evening. What we're going to present tonight is the NJSLA and the NJGPA results from the 2022 administration. So that is from the spring administration of the state standardized tests that obviously took place back in the spring. We are doing so in accordance with statute. So once you receive the results are to be, the individual results are to be shared with the parents and with the families, and then the results are also supposed to be shared with the public at a board meeting, and that is what we're doing this evening. Before we dive into the actual numbers, just want to give a little bit of context with the administration of the NJSLA and the NJGPA from the spring of '22. That context being that those exams that were administered in the spring were the first exams that were administered since the onset of the pandemic. The pandemic started in spring of 2020. That first year, obviously, nobody in the state was in school, and we did not administer the state exams. The next year was also a rocky year where students, depending on what school district you were in, students were in school, they were out of school, students were operating in cohorts, and it was a disrupted school year, and that was leading into the spring of '21. For the 21-22 school year, we returned to a lot more of normalcy, where school was a lot less interrupted on a grand scale. But what we did run into during that time, which is last school year, which, as everybody recalls, you still had a lot of challenges. You still had students quarantining, you still had teachers quarantining, so you had a lot of interrupted instruction, but just not on a grand scale. It affected more as individuals. But last year was certainly a disrupted school year and a challenging school year. That's the school year that led up to the spring, and in the spring we administered the standardized state tests. Those standardized state tests, again, came after a turbulent time and came after years of non-testing. So what we have here, what we're going to present tonight, is a return to testing and a benchmark for where our students are at. And I'll let Mrs. Rossi dive into a little bit more details on that.
Okay, so good evening. And just to piggyback off of some of those things, I think what's really important to remember is that as we're looking at this data, and I'll speak to this again later, this is one data point in terms of looking at multiple measures to look at student performance. But for the past 3 years, our focus has been on lots of other things. And in some ways, that's been a learning curve and in a positive way, because there are a lot of things that I think what we've been talking about on the global level, definitely on the national level, is that some of the needs that emerged during the days of COVID were needs that were bubbling just underneath the surface. And they had always been there, but it was almost, as we had gone through some of those challenging days, it was something that you couldn't, not only could you not ignore, but, it needed to be addressed in a much bigger way than ever before. And so one of those things that we noticed is that, of course, not only our students, our teachers, and everyone sitting here engaged in a global pandemic, which ultimately causes trauma and stress. And so before you can teach students, you have to first care for them, and you have to make sure that they're ready and accessible for learning. So survival and care became a top priority. Also learning how to navigate the road of virtual learning, cohorts, synchronous versus asynchronous. These were things that we had never done before. Our attention was focused on mandates and executive orders. How do we teach in masks? What does it look like when students are in quarantine instruction? How do we return to normalcy? Which we thought last year would be more of that. But what we found was last year became more of a calibration. We had to recalibrate because we weren't used to being in a classroom where teaching and learning felt the way that it did for almost 2 full school years. And there was a lot of kind of rebuilding the foundation of what needs to exist in a classroom before learning can flourish. And so as we look at these scores, one of the things that you'll hear on the national level when you look at things like the NAEP assessment, which basically gives you kind of an overall perspective on patterns within education compared to our global peers, is that we have seen 2 decades worth of growth washed away, which is dismal, as they say, but not unexpected. I think that is a narrative that when we take a deeper dive in the data here, there's surely a silver lining, and we're excited about some of the things we see that I will share with you now. These numbers are going to be hard to read for you, and this will be posted online, and I'm not going to go through every single number that you see, but I'm going to focus on some of the most important things. So this is an example where we compare Sparta's performance, specifically in language arts on this slide, to the performance at the state level. So if you look in the last 2 columns where you see district and state, level 4 and level 5, those are students that met a level 4, they met the standards, they met the expectations, and a level 5 is that they exceeded. So one of the things that you'll notice is, and I'll speak to this again later, is that one of the things that has been a pattern in performance is that we continue to exceed the state performance percentages, and that really those are the only percentages we have to compare ourselves to right now. So that remains kind of standard for us. You can see that there are 3 levels, or I'm sorry, like kind of 4 different variations of color, which I'll speak to later. But green means that you have students who are meeting or exceeding, and that's kind of how we color code our data even internally. Yellow represents students who are approaching the standards, or on our internal assessments, we call that population students who are on watch. So they're very close to meeting the standards. If we look at our orange or red populations, those are students who are at intervention or urgent intervention. And so when you look at those colors, we'll be able to talk a little bit later about the silver lining that I would like to, acknowledge as we are processing the changing of times and the new benchmark that we have to work with. So you'll notice similar things in math. And again, this is comparing our district to the state. So when you look at specifically the level 4 and 5, meeting and exceeding the standards, we are increased substantially compared to our state percentages, which is expected. Some of these charts, again, which will be easier for you to see when this is posted online, show us how we compare to ourselves. So what you're looking at is each grade level, and you can see the different years of testing in the various shades of purple. So you can see that the 21-22 data, which is basically the last bar in each of those clusters, has a significant drop. So our students have experienced significant interrupted learning. It's not learning loss. It means that we have work to do to catch up and to fill in the gaps that have been created. And so as we look at our math scores, we see similar things. And so one thing that I want to draw your attention to is pretty much across the board, and you can see this also if you reviewed our strategic plan, is that prior to this school year, and I'll go back to this slide so you can see it as well, in the 2018-19 school year, which is when we tested last under normal circumstances, we had some of the highest scores across the board in all of our grade levels. And based on the analysis of 5 years worth of data, those scores were highly competitive, if not meeting or exceeding our district factor group. And so what we know is that the things that we were doing, while they surely need, and we can continue to make progress and growth, we were surely on the right path. And so one thing I'll mention towards the end of this presentation is that what we know is that the core practices that were very difficult to implement during COVID have resulted in high quality learning experiences and performance. So simply getting back to those, we definitely believe will have results that will show student recoupment of skills and retainment of standards. So the question I have when I'm looking at this data is, where did those students go? So when we have almost 20% fewer students meeting or exceeding the standards, where are they? And so I'm going to come back to these slides in just a minute, but I'm going to show you where they are. So we are very fortunate to be able to partner with an organization like Linkit that helps present and create these comparison charts for us. And so I'm just going to describe to you what you're looking at. If you look at the first column, it shows you the cohorts. So students were tested in grade 3, for example, that very first row, and now they're being tested again in grade 6 after multiple years of not engaging in state testing. And out of those students, 8 students were exceeding the standards the last time that they were assessed in 2018-19. And so if you look kind of at the bottom of that row, it says all grades. So 160 students were exceeding the standards in 2018 and 19. So the question is, where are they now? So if they dropped, where did they drop and how far did they drop? And so if you look across that row, which is highlighted, it says ELA all grades, what you will see is you have 47% of students still meeting the standards. So the students who were exceeding in the past, 47% are meeting. 44% continue to exceed the standard. And when you're looking for the remaining percentage, so where are the other students who were meeting or exceeding and no longer are, they're in the approaching standard column, which means that they didn't experience significant regression. They experienced some regression, a small percentage experienced some regression. If you look at math, which is below it in blue, you'll see the same trends. So again, if you go down that blue column and you see math all grades, when there were 75 students exceeding the standards in 2018-19, you can follow that column across and see that the majority of them aren't exceeding, they're meeting. you have 13% who are still exceeding and a small percentage of students who are approaching. So our students, just looking at this, they call it a mobility chart, while they're experiencing some regression, and I guess I wouldn't say regression, but we don't have the same number of students meeting and exceeding, they are in fact approaching, which is important to note because my question initially looking at this data was, where did they go and how far behind are we finding ourselves? And you can see the same type of chart when we look at our students who are meeting the standards. So again, if I were to go back to say, that big bar that dropped, where did those kids go? And the pattern shows you that the majority of those students performed one level below where they did after 3 years of uninterrupted learning. And so we have plans for exactly how we can continue to support them because that's not substantial. That's absolutely very workable. Our bigger concerns, or not our bigger concerns, but different concerns, are students who weren't meeting the standards or exceeding the standards to begin with. Our students who were partial or were not meeting, who were showing, deficits or gaps to begin with. And so the question that remains is how we continue to close those gaps for students who fell further behind, and what kind of things can we put in place for them in addition to supplementing the students who are really close to meeting proficiency. So if I go back, you can just see that there are additional charts, again, that show our proficiency by race. And so you can see that there's variety and variability from populations of learners who are performing at a high level, consistently at a high level, yet somehow also consistently regressing, to populations who are showing the same level of low performance, lowered performance, that are, when we look at our total performance population, we see that there as well. So all of the trends, when you look at almost all of the charts, this is proficiency by race for math, you see similar patterns. This is our proficiency when you look at programming for ELA, and also when you look at proficiency by programming for math. So, before I tell you what all of this means, we also have information on our science scores. Our science scores were also returned to us. They don't follow a 5-scale score. There are 4 levels for the NJSLA science assessment. And you can see that they follow similar patterns. So of course, our performance band is not as high as it was, which again is in common with what we're all seeing after 3 years of interrupted learning, but we are performing higher, significantly higher than our state level counterparts in grade 5, 8, and 11. Last year, for the first time, the state administered something called the New Jersey Graduation Proficiency Assessment, so the NJGPA. It was a field test. It doesn't count for anything. They shared that with us afterwards, but it was trying to give the state information on readiness, college and career readiness. And so what's challenging, which we're going to continue to do, is try to unpack this information. So in some cases, we have really great reports that you can do a lot of things with. And in other cases, this is the first time NJGPA was administered. There's not a ton of reports that give you insightful information. And so we're trying to make sense of what these numbers mean and what we can do with them to be productive in supporting student learning. But you can see these are percentages, students who were not graduation ready versus percentages of students who were. And in ELA, we had 51% as graduation ready as compared to the state's 39, and in math we had 70% as compared to the state's 50. So I think the state is still trying to determine what this all means, which is why it's not being counted for anything at this time. All right, so the big question is, now what, and what does that mean, and what do we do with all this? Well, the first thing is it's one measure, and it doesn't mean it's not an important measure, but it's one measure. We have a lot of local assessment data, which correlates very nicely with our standardized assessment data, which is why we continue to use our local screeners like the STAR assessment. And so we don't have to wait until the next NJSLA assessment in May. We can be looking internally at our data to see how students are moving and if the targeted supports that we're putting in place are working. We are consistently above the state average with our largest population falling in the approached expectations category, which is not yet at the intervention level, but also is not meeting or exceeding benchmark. Most students, many students, not most, many students who fell one performance band below where they performed before the interruptions of COVID. Our most vulnerable students are the students that we've been planning for and continue to look for varied ways to support so that we can reduce the widening of the gap that they have already been experiencing, again, prior to COVID. In terms of responding, this is not just based on content, skills, and standards. While that obviously is a focus, if students aren't ready or accessible for learning, which is what we experienced last year when we expected everybody to come back and we're back to school, there were habits that were built from learning at home or from being in cohort A versus cohort B that were challenging. There were, we're dealing with different attitudes about learning in terms of like levels of motivation or just being able to respond to more common and standard rigorous learning opportunities that typically occur inside the classroom that obviously changed over the last few years. So there's a lot of acclimation that needs to happen includes and then in addition to academic skills and standards. We are continuing to unpack the data. One of the things that we've had experience and support from consultants, and we've also done this work in the district for a really long time. One of the most informative things you can do with this data is look at item analysis to make sure that, number one, we can see what standards our students need most support on, and number two, we can see how those standards are assessed to make sure that our assessments are not only high quality and rigorous, but aligned to the same expectations that the standardized assessments utilize. While we have a lot of things in place that I'll continue to show you, this is new territory. So we are problem solving constantly, collaborating as a team, working with professionals in the field. And lastly, we're being very considerate and intentional about how we're responding. One of the biggest pieces of feedback when you talk to educators and specialists across the state is that you have to be very mindful about how many things you change at once, because we were dealing with so much change over the last few years that consistency and normalcy and an ability to return to what we know worked is going to be another important part of this. So preserving those high quality practices that helped our students perform the way they did prior to this. And so that's what we're doing this year. We're returning to high quality teaching and learning. That can be our top priority. There are far fewer distractions and interruptions that we have to respond to. So it is our priority across the district. It was the message over the summer at our admin retreat. It was the message when we returned to school. We are all working to support this from all kinds of angles. We know how important the concept of acceleration is. So that's been something new that's been described at in education right now at the state level and beyond, is that the old-fashioned approach of remediating, which is moving back and meeting the child where they are and moving them forward, is not going to close gaps at a rapid pace. So the idea is to accelerate learning where you're continuing to move forward, but you're spiraling back and filling in the gaps as you're doing that so you can continue to move students forward. We are implementing data teams at every school, which will help with a variety of things. Our extended learning programs will be up and running. That's grounded in data. We've done a lot of different work to adjust those programs to make sure they're suitable for all learners and needs. We've recommitted to the RTI model and JTSS, which now spans into a bridge to 9th grade. So we have those supports at a high school level, thanks to our teams and educators. We continue to expand high quality resources. We have had access to new tools. We've built new courses. We have instructional coaches. We have new levels of student support. We are using our strategic plan and our goals to provide targeted instruction, small group instruction, and make sure differentiation is a priority. We can no longer, and we knew this before, but no longer can you be successful teaching in a classroom when you're teaching to the whole. There is no whole anymore. We have students in all different places with all different needs. We're developing partnerships with all kinds of different professionals, including the National Writing Project, St. Elizabeth, our work with Tracy Severance, the New Jersey Coalition for Inclusive Practices, which is a focus when we look at our students with our students with IEPs and our population of students with learning disabilities, is that what we know is inclusive education is the direct path to increase performance by providing students with high quality experiences, curricula, and instruction, and supporting those experiences within the classroom is really the number one way. We already started some of that work, and we're reinvesting and moving forward by expanding that and by recommitting to that focus. We're working with student representatives across the board to understand their experiences, and of course, we're providing additional activities for students for a variety of different means. So that's a quick snapshot of where we are right now. I just want to take a minute and thank all of the educators and the students. This has been, an incredible 3 years, and I think we should be proud of where we are and where we're headed. And I think that it's taken a lot of time and effort and collaboration to reset, regroup, and move towards a path that will surely bring us back to where we know we're capable of going. So thank you.
And just kind of to summarize and to recap everything that Mrs. Rossi just talked about, we started this portion of the meeting, we started this presentation by speaking to the challenges that our students and our teachers and our community have faced. Those were challenges, but they're not excuses, and they can't be excuses. So what we needed to learn is we knew the pandemic was going to affect everybody. They were going to affect our students. They were going to affect our teachers. How bad did it affect them? In what way did it affect them? And how can we help them? So although these test results are not glowing and they're not what we want them to be, they are the truth. They are the honest place of where we're at right now. And what do we do with that information is the next question. And that's what Mrs. Rossi just went through. What are we doing with that information? We're doing a lot with that information. So as Mrs. Rossi stated, the silver lining is we knew students were going to lose something in the pandemic. They didn't lose a ton for the most part. They fell to a category, but they fell to that approaching category. What are we going to do about it is the question, and this is what we're going to do about it. And along with our strategic plan, which I'll get into as part of my superintendent report, the plan is in place, the roadmap is in place to address what we know now.
Good, thank you, guys.
Tara, I just have a question. Is this solely on gen ed kids, or
No, those are those groups that were in there.
does that include the alternative testing too for special education, or no?
The DL, what's that called?
DLM?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that will be shared with you as the board.
Okay.
That doesn't include this in this presentation. This is NJSLA and NJGPA.
Okay, thank you.
We're required to share that with the board. We will share that.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to our student representatives report.
Yes, and if I could just
Oops, sorry.
introduce who we have. No, we just want to introduce. We have Shannon Ferguson and Jack Hill.
Hope you all are having a great evening. So this is one of our biggest weeks as student council representatives. It is homecoming week. So we started off the week with Spirit Week. It has been anything from Wear Pink Day to bring anything but a backpack day. And we're making it a competition between the classes, which is making it really fun. Everyone's participating. We also sold homecoming tickets. It was $15 a ticket, or it was $10 a ticket and you had to bring 5 cans of food. And the cans are going to be given to the Sparta food pantry. So tomorrow we're going to have our first ever outside pep rally. At the pep rally, we're going to acknowledge all the fall sports teams and their captains. We're also going to have cool events planned for the students as well.
Yeah, and then also I'm Shannon. Nice to meet you guys. And then after that, we have our homecoming dance on Saturday night. So we pretty much have all the students have already bought tickets and everything, and we had a good selection of donations for the food pantry. So yeah, it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a fun night, and I'm very excited. So thank you guys for allowing us to have that. That's everything for us.
That's good. Nice,
Thank you.
nice work, guys. Have a blessed homecoming. Enjoy. Moving on to the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Lauren, is that you? Sorry, thank you. Second?
Second.
Wendy, thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. McKernan,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Morris,
Abstain.
Ms. Seelander,
Yes.
Dr. Serrano,
Yes.
Mr. Paleschi,
Yes. Okay, moving on. Dr. Beck for your superintendent's report.
I just wanted to get ahead of it. My superintendent report will start with strategic plan, action plan, recap, or actually update of where we're at. So over the past couple of board meetings, I've been updating the board and the community verbally about where we are on certain aspects of the strategic plan. But just to recap, we went over the strategic planning process last school year. The Board of Education board approved goals, and from there, we created strategic plan, action plan teams in each building. And we set goals last year. If you recall, it was the March of '22 board meeting where we presented the goals for each building and for different departments like central office and the special education department. That led us into the end of the school year. The school year picked up this year, and we immediately got into it with re-engaging our strategic plan, action planning groups, our individual teams at each building. What we did was we took the targeted goals that we presented in March and came up with an actual action plan based on those goals. As you can see, there are action steps associated with each goal. There are partners, who's responsible for each goal, what is the evidence of completion for each goal, and what is the timeline for each goal. I'm not going to stand up here tonight and go through each and every one of these goals. That's going to take quite some time. What I am going to do is explain what this looks like and navigate our way through it. That way, when we post it online, you folks can review it at your own leisure, and of course, ask questions as you want. So what you see here is what I just explained, and if it's one big spreadsheet, one big Google sheet, and what you'll see is on the bottom, you will see the different teams. You will see the different action plans. So the one you're looking at right now is central office, and when you scroll to, or when you click on the other ones, it's according to team. So you have special services, and then you have the schools in order. You have Alpines, you have Mohawks, you have Helen Morgan's, Sparta Middle School, and Sparta High School. This is what the strategic plan, action plan teams created from the start of the school year until now. It's important to remember that the targeted goals are subject to revision based on where we're at and what we feel that we need in each individual building, and also that the action steps might have to be revised if we run into challenges or successes, and that the timeline also might be revised as we go. So the way that this is going to work is every month each one of these teams is going to meet, and they're going to go over their action plan, and they're going to update their action plan. They're going to do a status check within their own buildings, and when they do that, they all have editing power to this master spreadsheet, and they will edit live into this master spreadsheet for their own buildings, and they will revise accordingly. And Mrs. Rossi and I will be meeting with those groups too on a regular basis. Just to go back to central office, we'll just go over to central office ones briefly. We start with the improvement of student achievement. I'll actually let Mrs. Rossi speak to the top two, if you can read it that far.
I can't see that. I'm going to walk and talk and hopefully not trip. All right, so yeah, when it comes to making data-driven decisions, it's important that we are looking at, and as I spoke to the data teams, we're looking at data for various reasons. Oh, sorry, my back's to you now. So at any rate, some of the different decisions we look at when we're analyzing data, first is that our district has a lot of data. And so not all data is good data. Not all data is data that is actionable. And it's important to make sure that we have the right groups of people looking at the right data to ensure that we're taking action to support all students. And so when I say that, when we're supporting all students, we're looking at Tier 1, which is the instruction that's happening in the curriculum. So based on data analysis, it could cause us to adjust scope and sequence, focus on different portions of the curriculum, build in remediation, acceleration, I should say. When we're looking at Tier 2 and Tier 3, it's what type of intensive supports do students need. So our data analysis allows us to support all students in an organized way with a concrete plan for how to do that. And the other goal that we're looking at under student achievement, we know that that's based on rigorous academic performance and also ensuring that our students are ready to learn and accessible for learning. And so we've engaged in that 3-year SCAPE plan with the St. Elizabeth's University. I always want to say that wrong. And there are school-based teams that are being generated to ensure that that work is specific to the needs of that building and not just generalized at the district level, which sometimes doesn't meet the needs of our high schoolers or our second graders. And so they're doing that work. We're reporting out on that monthly, and you can see just based on like the color coding over towards the right, like when those items are going to be worked on and accomplished by. Some are already done, some are like one-time things, and some will be work for the remainder of the year.
With these frequent updates, one thing that we added, so every week our administrative team meets, the administrative team from around the district. We all get together downstairs and we meet once a week, every Tuesday. And one of the things that we're adding to that is once a month we are starting every one of those admin meetings once a month with an update from each building on the strategic plan. So they can report out, of course, to us, but we're going to be in the loop anyway, but also to the other administrators. So a principal of one building might not be totally in tune to what's going on in the other buildings, and we think that it would be beneficial and productive for all the buildings to know where everyone is at and to report that out once a week. That's just one of the things that we added to our admin meetings this year. Just going back to the central office things, these are things that I have spoken to over the past couple of months. Where are we in the communications plan, the communications audit and the communications plan? We have hired the consultant, which we did last spring. We are just about to send out those surveys. I just had to do a pre-survey and send it to the consultant about the things, general things about the district size, the buildings, how many students, how many people live in the community, that sort of thing. Those stakeholder surveys are going to go out very soon. That's where we're at right now. In the meantime, we're going through the communication audit. What forms of communication do we use in the district currently? What works and what doesn't? That's going to be part of the survey. And then from there, we're going to create a communications plan, which we will hope to have in the late winter, which you would see on the Gantt chart if you're looking at the timeline there. That's the communications portion. The technology audit, also we board approved a consultant for that late spring, early summer. We are actually going to meet with that consultant in the next 2 weeks to go through what the technology audit will look like in our district. And then once the technology audit is completed in our district, they will come up with a technology plan as to what do we currently have, what do we need, and how do we continue to update our technology. That's all going to be part of the technology plan, which the goal is to be completed by the spring. Sustainable Jersey for schools, that's where we have, where you get certification by each school building and about which, it's in accordance to a checklist of how green your school is. So where we're at right now is, I didn't want to overwhelm our staff when we first came back to school, give them a little bit to settle in, but we have to form green teams in each school. We're forming a lot of teams in schools, so I wanted to give them a second. But what we're going to do is we're going to form green teams in each school, and those green teams are going to go through a checklist of items that you earn points for. What do you do in your building? What policies do you have? What protocols do you have? What cleaning products do you use? Things like that that can earn you points. And if each building earns a certain amount of points, that building earns Sustainable Jersey certification. So we're hoping to go through that process starting very soon to form those green teams, go through the audits in each building, and hopefully be on the list to earn certification this spring. That's where we are with the sustainable schools. And the executive training, I've been updating the board and the community on where we've been with the executive training. We We had the admin retreat over the summer. We had the consultant come in and work with the admin team then. We had individual meetings where the consultant worked with individual administrators, and the consultant will continue to work. We're figuring out other ways that the consultant will continue to work to support our strategic plan. And that's where we are with central office. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all of them, but what I will do is I will post these either tomorrow or early next week on the website under a strategic planning section, and you will be able to review this yourself, and of course, reach out with any questions. If it's a building level question, it might be more appropriate to reach out to the building principal, but you can reach out at any time and be happy to assist. That's the first part of the superintendent report. Moving on to an update on the Student Board Advisory Group. Some more great progress to report on that. As I reported out last month about our progress, there's more progress to report. As you'll see on tonight's agenda, the Student Board Advisory Groups for the middle school and the high school are on the agenda for approval as clubs. And also the volunteer advisors are on the agenda as well for approval. Mr. Paleschi, Mrs. Rossi, and I met with Paige and Sasha and Mr. Kraus last Monday on the 10th, on Columbus Day. We met via Google Meet, and we just went over exactly how we think this is going to look, and so that we were all on the same page. And what that same page looks like is the Student Board Advisory Group is going to begin to meet after tonight, assuming they're board approved. Then they can start to engage in their work, and they're going to meet and they're going to solicit feedback from students within the buildings. They're going to report that feedback to the Board of Education. The Board of Education is going to form an ad hoc committee that's going to meet on committee nights. Our committee meeting nights start at 5:30. We moved up at 5 o'clock, actually. This new group will meet. So as Mr. Paleschi explained, we will have rotating members of the board meet with presumably rotating members or at least leadership from the advisory group each month and get their feedback. And one of the first things that we're going to do is when they first engage, one of their first meetings, I asked, it's a student-driven group, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to come to the first meeting, first to introduce myself to the group, but also to do a little training for the students in that group on how boards of education function, and what the role of the board is, and what the role of administration is. That way, when they are discussing things within their groups, it's very productive that they're not asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. So we're going to do that in one of our first groups. So Sasha's here tonight, so thank you for your work so far, Sasha, and moving forward, of course. On to some students. Let's talk more about students. The Sussex County College Art Publication. We had Caitlin Siak's photograph that was titled Deadlock, and Zephyrina Turturo's artwork called Prince Shadow. They were published in the 2022 edition of Idiom and Image, which is the arts and literacy magazine for Sussex County College. Caitlin and Zephyrina also participated and won awards in the 2022 Sussex County Teen Arts Festival, so congratulations to those young ladies. More good news to report. We are still in the midst of fall sports, so we'll have some more fall sports to report on. But one thing that operates a little differently, as there are championships by week, let's say, is how our marching Spartans have been doing. After emerging victorious from numerous competitions, including the Madison competition, a Butler competition, and a competition hosted by Sparta, the Marching Spartans are the #1 ranked band in our division for the entire competitive circuit, which consists of 7 states along the East Coast. If you've had the honor of attending one or more of these competitions or watching our Marching Spartans under the Friday night football lights, you can see how much hard work they have put in and how much that hard work has paid off. Congratulations to Mr. Lopez, the students, and the countless volunteers who make this program a success. We wish them the best of luck as they compete actually this coming Sunday, October 23rd, at the Region 10 New York City Metro Area Championships at West Essex High School. And lastly, some more student recognition. is National Merit Scholars. Sparta High School students Andrew Riza and Claire Zhu have been named commended students in the 2023 National Merit Scholarship Program. They will be presented with a letter of commendation from the school and National Merit Scholarship Corporation. So a great feat for those individuals as well. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Beck's impressive updates. Moving on to our approval of the HIB report. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Kurt, thank you. Second?
Second.
Vanessa, thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. McKernan,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Ms. Seelander,
Yes.
Dr. Serrano,
Yes.
Mr. Paleschi.
Yes. Now, moving on to our delegate liaison reports. Go ahead, Vanessa.
I just wanted to remind everyone the turkey trot will take place on Thursday, November 24th. Registration is currently open. If you're interested, you can go to crowsturkeytrot.com to register. They are also looking for volunteers, so even if you're not participating, hopefully you'll show up and support.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I had the opportunity to sit on the Sussex County School Board's meeting this Monday, and of course, they are looking forward to seeing all of us at our convention next week. I know a lot of us are planning to go down there. And there will be a training held down there as well by Thomas Gambino from the New Jersey Department of Education. I'll send you guys my notes from the meeting, but Dr. Beck, you're familiar with him, and he spoke extensively on the recent swatting that districts have experienced, and thank God nothing happened in our school, but as we're all aware, we can never, prevention, obviously stopping threats before things become a threat is of utmost importance, and he highlighted how it all starts and ends with prevention, because right now, unfortunately, there is someone planning a terrible event, and so it accentuates the importance of the threat assessment team that we've already established in Sparta, and I just want to thank you again, and Dr. Esposito and team for being ahead of that, because it's something that not everyone has in their district, and certainly that Sigma training is quite extensive. And similarly, they spoke about that at the Garden State Coalition of Schools as well. That was a major topic of discussion. That meeting also included a really wonderful presentation from Dr. Lily Edwards, who's the former Drew Professor of History and African American Studies. She's currently at the head of the Amistad Coalition, and she gave a beautiful presentation on infusing African Americans in the K through 12 curriculum. So I'll be sharing notes on that, but just highlighting the continued need for the work that we're doing with the College of St. Elizabeth, but it was a really great presentation as well. And to your point, too, Dr. Beck, they did highlight at the end about the need for letting educators just get back to the work of teaching, and the concern with the additional assessments that they have mandated from the state, and hopefully we can move away from those so that we can just focus on our own benchmarks, and we have support of our coalition for that. That's all from those.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, moving on to public comment number 1, which is for action items only. Public comments are invited on matters pertaining only to action items at this time. Please state the action item number, as well as your name, municipality, and group affiliation if appropriate for the record. Each participant will receive 3 minutes to speak. There will be a countdown timer. You will be notified when there is 1 minute remaining, and then again when the time is up at the end of 3 minutes. Speakers may not cede their time to others. This portion of the meeting is meant to hear public comment and not to have a dialogue between the board and the person speaking. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking, and do not disrupt the meeting, or you may be asked to leave. All statements should be directed to me as the presiding officer. The board or administration may respond to any questions or comments after the conclusion of the public participation. Do we have anybody for public comment number 1? Is the sign-in sheet in the back?
We should bring that up.
Do you guys mind moving the sign-up sheet up to the podium? Thank you.
Hi, Sasha Nelson. I'm not
Hey,
sure
Sasha.
what the number is, but I just wanted to thank everyone, especially Dr. Beck, for being so supportive of the Student Advisory Board from the, thank you.
Sasha, you don't know. That's fine.
Yeah.
I'll write it down. I'll find it.
It's the advisory
Yeah.
board one, yeah.
I don't know which one it is off the top of my head either, so
Thank you.
15.21.
thank you.
And I am looking forward to working with all of you in helping the gap of communication between the students and the Board of Education close. And yeah, so thank you all very much. That's all.
Thank you, Sasha.
Hi, Jenny Derricks, Tap into Sparta. I just have a couple questions, Mr. Paleski. They're actually for Ms. Rossi. Does the Linkit reports have the ability to compare Sparta's results to other districts? And then in the color-coded ELA math results where you showed the bars relating to levels 1 through 5, state versus Sparta, the level 5 seemed to be dropped down. The 4 seemed to be in good shape, but level 5 was dropped down. And then your next report talking about students that in the past had met or exceeded also seemed to have slightly dropped down. I did see that you talked about having data teams working on tiers 1 through 3. Are there commensurate teams working on those 4s and 5s, or is that a different animal? Poor choice of words, sorry about that. And then, let's see. Just anecdotally, I have a number of students talk to me at the beginning of the year. I understand there's benchmark, and I don't know the name of the testing that's done, benchmark, at the high school anyway. And just, again, anecdotally, not a scientific sample, but there was kind of a theme that the students just took the test and they guessed, and they didn't really put much effort into it because it seems that they didn't understand what the import was. Why bother? So just passing that along. Again, totally unscientific, but just thought I'd pass it along. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Derricks.
Hi, Caitlin Gagnon, Summit Road, Sparta.
Hi, Ms. Gagnon.
I have two questions. One was actually to follow up on that. So maybe if Ms. Rossi can just kind of clarify. The STAR assessment testing that the students are receiving, from what you explained, it kind of seems like that's almost a precursor to the state testing that we see later in the year. So I just would like to maybe hear a little bit more about that and where that plays into the process. I'm sure that's not reflected necessarily in like the charts that we saw, but I'm just curious as to where that, as a concerned parent, where that would be. And then the other question I had would, I guess, piggyback on the superintendent's report, which I don't have the number in front of me, I'm sorry. I'm hoping to buy myself some time for a later comment. So one of the questions I had the opportunity to attend the Sparta Band Showcase with my family. It was amazing. My sons absolutely loved it. It was great. I do think it's safe to say that our marching band is in a league of its own, as you've mentioned, just based on the credentials that you've shared tonight. That being said, have we revisited the marching band trailer issue? Can we look forward to this investment in our marching band soon? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comment number 1? Can I have a motion to close public comment number 1, please?
Motion. Me.
Wendy, thank you. Second?
Second.
Vanessa, thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Sorry, jumped the gun again.
To do this.
Just wanted to follow up for Sasha Nelson's comment. Again, thank you to Sasha, thank you to Paige, Mr. Kraus and Mr. Wessels, and to the Board of Education for supporting this group. I'm remiss by not mentioning, and I failed to mention, I even had it in my notes, and I don't know why I didn't mention it, but just to acknowledge Maddie sitting at the table again tonight. We decided that, we decided that both Maddie and Chad Wood, who were elected by the student body to sit at the table, that they would both sit at the table from this point forward. There was no need to alternate them as their schedules would permit. Obviously, one schedule did not permit this evening. But I wanted to also mention along that line that how these student representatives that are the board representatives will work closely with that student advisory group, that they will work to attend those meetings, and that they will work to, that group will be a voice to the committee. But among other things that the representatives are going to do, they're going to be the voice of that committee here at this table as well. And I just met with Maddie and Chad yesterday, as we are going to meet before every board meeting to just glance at the agenda items. Very exciting work for them, and go through what the meeting, what's going to come of the meeting. And but actually, what we really wanted to talk about yesterday, and what we did talk about yesterday, is what this looks like with the student representatives sitting at the board table. We're not really sure what that looks like. The state said this is what you need to do, and this is what we're doing, but we're going to kind of make it our own, and it's going to evolve, and it's going to grow. And they already had some suggestions yesterday of what they might want to do on a monthly basis to report at the table. So as last meeting and this meeting, Maddie and our representatives might appear to be a little silent at the table. That's going to grow in a good way, and they're going to have a voice, and that voice is going to evolve as to what they speak about. So I just wanted to follow up. I did not mention that during my superintendent report, and I apologize, so I took Sasha's comment and took that opportunity. And then I'll go back to Caitlin's question about the Sparta, the trailer. Yeah, so we're trying to figure out exactly what happened this current year with the trailer, but that aside, we have already begun conversations about how we can budget for that next year and how we might be able to perhaps fundraise, perhaps look at grants, perhaps figure it out. But absolutely part of our discussion, and the budgeting process, believe it or not, it's only October, the budgeting process is going to start very soon, and that is absolutely part of the discussion.
I'll just respond to some of the items that were directed to me. So first of all, I think that we're talking about, when you're looking at like sample districts like us, that's called our district factor group, which really isn't something that they use, but it's definitely something that we're still internally comparing ourselves to. That data was not released by the state, nor was the county. Usually you look at your performance compared to the county and compared to the state. But Linkit has run, I just went to a workshop last week where they start looking at district factor group schools that use their platform. So it's like a sample size, and they're starting to generate that data for us. It's not been released. They released something called Navigator reports, which like gives us this ability to analyze data in a bigger way, which are some of the things that you saw in there. They haven't released that, so they showed us some sample slides where we can start to glean some information. One of the things that is interesting about districts that use data is they typically perform about at least a percentage above other districts, primarily probably because the use and the dedication to the analytics, but that's not information that we are looking to, like, we're not sure what to do with that because it's not been something that's been released to us yet. So we've seen samples of it. In terms of the performance levels that you spoke about, yes, that is correct. We see more students performing in a level 4, which is meeting standards, and fewer students performing at the exceeding standard range. So we're trying to unpack why. You know, there's so many different reasons, so many different variables. One of the big ones being like how long our students were out of school for as compared to how long were other districts closed. We were doing a lot of different things around the state, so all of those things impact student learning. So that is where we are now. The bulk of our students are at meeting benchmark or approaching benchmark. When we talk about the tiers 1 through 3, that is part of the New Jersey state tiered system of supports. So it's how, those are the levels of supports that we provide to kids within a school system, and we provide those supports academically and also for social, emotional, and behavioral support. So you might have heard it be referred to as like RTI, where tier 1 are the supports that every student has access to, universal supports in the curriculum, in the classroom, like your curriculum, things of that nature. And then Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports are more intensive. And so they don't relate to the performance bands. Yeah, I know there's a lot of numbers and a lot of jargon, but they're completely different numbers, if you will. One referring to supports, one referring to performance. When we talk about our benchmark, there are 2 different assessments. So as Lauren was speaking about earlier, like really trying to determine what the best data to analyze might be, where the most meaning comes from. And so far, throughout the course of COVID, we've seen that our internal data, which is called STAR, has given us really helpful information. We administer that 3 times a year. It's not new. We've had it now. I think we used it at the high school for the first time last year. And we brought it up to the high school because we see prior to COVID and throughout, we see high levels of correlation. So we decided that it was a meaningful assessment to give. It gives us meaningful results and positive results, because when we didn't have an assessment to look towards, we only had STAR. And what we saw through STAR that I didn't mention because I'm not presenting on STAR tonight is that even since we returned from that March 2020, we've seen gradual levels of growth. So Start Strong, STAR and Start Strong, not confusing at all. Start Strong is the standardized test that the state administered or mandated that be administered in the month of September. So as I spoke up before, and what we do with those results, we're just getting all of this data kind of coming back to us. So that kind of goes back to how we're managing it and how we're looking at it. But one of the things you spoke to is kind of kids just clicking and to what degree that happens, or how motivated are they to show what they know on an assessment. And that's one of the things that we're seeing as a trend in returning back to what feels like the most normal year of education, is like rebuilding that level of motivation, because our expectations and our structures and our standards were lowered. It had to be, because we could not access all of the things that we know and use normally during those last few years. So now as we're coming back to normal and we're re-elevating and raising those standards, there's a transition for students. And so we're working through that. Well, I guess one last thing I want to add is that, so I think one of the questions was about, so STAR, local assessment, that data will be shared out. Actually, that data will be available on the Linkit Parent Portal. So there were a couple of things that I meant to say, kind of keep an eye out for from my office. And one of those things is that you will have access. We wanted to wait until that data was generated, so you'll be able to see all assessment data compiled in one place for your child. So Start Strong, STAR, NJSLA, NJGPA, which will allow you also to look at trends in your students' performance to see not only how they performed on just one point in time, but how they're performing over the course of time, and what growth looks like, which is a big focus of what we're looking at. How can we make sure that every student is making progress? And I think I'll just stop there.
Good, thank you. Moving on to section 15, personnel and policy. We're looking to move action items 15.1 through 15.38. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Kurt, thank you. Second?
Second.
Lauren, thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. McKernan?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Ms. Seelander?
Yes.
Dr. Serrano?
Yes.
Mr. Paleschi?
Yes. Moving on to section 16.
Craig, can I just say something?
Sorry, yes.
On that, I did just want to recognize that it says, we have Robert Medina, who's leaving after 25 years. He's retiring. Just want to thank him for his years of service to the district. That's a commendable amount of time. I know he's done some great work in the district, so I wanted to thank him for his service to the district.
Thank you. Moving on to section 16, curriculum and instruction and special services. I'm looking to move action items 16.1 through 16.10. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Vanessa, thank you. Second?
Second.
Kurt, thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. McKernan?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Ms. Seelander?
Yes.
Dr. Serrano?
Yes.
Mr. Pelesci?
Yes. Moving on to section 17, finance. We're looking to move action items 17.1 through 17.11. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion?
Patrick, thank you. Second?
Second.
Vanessa, was that you?
Mhm.
Yes, thank you. Discussion?
Yeah. 17.5. The bathrooms in Alpine.
Yes.
A couple years ago, it got brought up, not sure what the price was then, but then it got brought up this year for $250,000. I was told it wasn't going to cost that much, which you were right, it's not. It's going to be $287,000. Let's round up to 300 probably by the time it's done. I just find it hard that I'm the only one that sees this troubling when we have a school that still has the trailers, still has the walkway, unattended, never touched. Feasibility study that's been completed, who knows how long we're gonna be in these schools going forward, but we're still gonna dump money into a school that's not benefiting anybody. Okay, to me, it's bad spending. Okay, we have other things that can be worked on, and it's misuse of funds in my eyes, and I think there's a lot of other things we can do within the district with $300,000. That's,
I just want to comment on the process. We estimated that it would cost $250,000, and we went out to bid, and the 280, how many bids were there, Ms. Black?
9 bids.
There were 9 bids, and during the bid opening, this was the lowest of those bids. Many bids came in significantly higher than that, so this is the absolute lowest bid, which comes in higher than our estimate. As far as not benefiting anyone, I believe it benefits a lot of people. I believe it benefits the students. I believe it benefits the staff who are in dire need.
how does it benefit the students? It's not their restroom.
Well, they'll have staff that won't be waiting outside of a restroom in between classes.
But, I mean, there's still a lot of things within a school that can benefit the students for $300,000 opposed to, as it said, toilets, you know, I mean, I can talk round and round. I've been talking about
Right.
this for
Dr.
the
Back.
past 3 years, but,
That was me, sorry.
It's the speakers, I don't know.
Could you give us the update of the current status of the facilities and what we are looking to do to them? So,
Tonight?
meaning, can you describe the current facility as far as what the teachers have access to? And what we
that
are
particular
looking.
I thought you wanted like a full facilities
No, no.
report. The
No, about this particular
restroom
item.
facility.
Yes.
And what it currently looks like.
And what we would like to do with this money in order to renovate it. So
Yeah,
what
I-
are we taking it from to?
I believe there's one or maybe 2 stalls in that building for staff right now, for female staff. And the female staff pushing probably 100 in that building. So you do the math on the ratio. This would absolutely expand that significantly. And also, as far as putting money into this and the potential for a new building down the road, if tonight you were to board approve a new school based on a referendum and the public voted on or anything like that, you're looking at a minimum of 5 years from the time you put a shovel in the ground until the students walk through the door. So in the next 5 years, you're still going to have the same problem that we have now. So I understand you don't agree. I'm just saying that is the rationale from the administration's point of view. And that's the rationale.
I mean, it's just, I don't need to tell anyone my thinking, but it's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
To be put into a school when there's other issues going on that can be fixed before this issue.
Do you have a list of those issues that are not being fixed?
What's that?
Do you have a list of the issues that are not being fixed?
In what school? The Alpine school?
I mean, well, I think you
The
were.
Alpine school, I mean, the all-purpose room, the floor's all cracked. The kids are still in the trailers the trailers were supposed to be gone years ago. An uncovered path that's supposed to be covered years ago. You know, there's a lot of things. That's just a handful of them, you know?
Okay, thank you guys for that discussion. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Joanne, roll call, please.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. McKernan,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Morris,
Yes, no, 17.5.
Ms. Sealander,
Yes.
Dr. Serrano,
Yes.
Mr. Pellecci.
Yes. Moving on to section 18, operations. We're looking to move action items 18.1 through 18.3. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Kurt, thank you. Second?
Second.
Lauren, thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please, Joanne.
Ms. Collier,
Yes.
Mr. McKernan,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Morris,
Yes.
Ms. Sealander,
Yes.
Dr. Serrano,
Yes.
Mr. Pellecci.
Yes. Now moving on to section 19, is there any old business?
Mr. President, if I could just make a comment that I likely should have made at the beginning of the meeting. And I just wanted to, on behalf of Mrs. Grano, who's unable to make the meeting tonight as well, I know we took a moment of silence earlier in the meeting to recognize Mrs. Shepherd, but I also want to just publicly recognize Mrs. Huber for taking over Mrs. Shepherd's class, Mrs. Spence, her grade level partner, the administration at Helen Morgan, and all the staff that work at Helen Morgan and in this district to support the Shepherd family, but also to support the students in that class and in that school. And I just want to recognize too that I realize how hard it is likely for all of the people that worked with Mrs. Shepherd who are also mourning her as their colleague and their friend. So we're so grateful. Excuse me. We're so grateful to Mrs. Huber, Mrs. Spence, and the administration and everyone at Helen Morgan for taking care of those children and keeping their environment consistent for them. It's very courageous for Mrs. Huber to take that position. I think she's very brave, and we very much appreciate her, so thank you.
Thank you. Good. Moving on to section 20, any new business? We'll move on to public comment number 2. The board uses the second public comment period to invite comments on all matters pertaining to the district. Please state your name, municipality, and group affiliation if appropriate for the record. Each participant will receive 3 minutes to speak. There will be a countdown timer. You will be notified when there is 1 minute remaining, and then again when time is up at the end of 3 minutes. Speakers may not cede their time to others. This portion of the meeting is meant to hear public comment, not to have a dialogue between the board and the person speaking. The board asks that members of the public be courteous and mindful of the rights of other individuals when speaking and not disrupt the meeting, or you may be asked to leave. All statements should be directed to me as the presiding officer. The board or administration may respond to any questions or comments after the conclusion of the public participation.
Hello, Dana Galino, 26 Valley View Trail, Sparta, New Jersey.
Hi, Ms. Glenn.
I'll just make it really quick. I am absolutely mortified that our current board member and someone who's also running for another 3-year seat just said that a crack in a floor is more important than 100 women needing to use the restroom. I just want to go on the record. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Good evening again. I'm glad you made it, Mr. Zittimer. I know your plate is, Caitlin Gagnon, Sparta Summit Room.
Thank you.
I know your plate's full this week. I promise to spare you any tears while I'm speaking. Another question I'd like to follow up on from the last meeting, Dr. Beck, is there any update on the feasibility study, or at least an accessible version of it, soon to be made available to the public? Just curious if there are any developments we can look forward to. On the Alpine faculty bathroom note, access to sanitation is a basic human right, Mr. Morris. Just keep that in mind. Next was the marching band, which we covered. Thanks again, Dr. Beck. This one's tough, but I'd like to bring up a pretty concerning issue that was made public by an anonymous poster on a local Facebook page, Sparta Parents for Public Education. While I can assure the public that anonymous posting is not quite my style, I do appreciate what they've shared. In their post, they noted a page called the Family Policy Alliance of New Jersey, a lobbyist organization with the mission to, quote, advance biblical citizenship, equip and elect statesmen, promote policy, and serve an effective alliance, all committed to a common vision. The organization goes on to quote, biblical principles apply in all areas of life, including politics and government. Interesting, end quote. I have to preface this next bit clearly by announcing this is not an attack. This is a genuine concern. A sitting board member, Lauren Collier, appears to have participated in a survey with this organization. One of the questions she was asked, quote, would you support a resolution from the local school board opposing the new learning standards for social and sexual health? Ms. Collier replied, yes. I voted them down as I support the comprehensiveness of the existing 2014 standards. She went on to discuss abstinence and concluded, quote, with the support of like-minded individuals, we will absolutely work to modify the implementation of the new social and sexual health learning standards in our district, end quote. So I ask, although this is a hypothetical question, it's a relevant hypothetical with tremendous implications. What does working to modify the implementation of the new social and sexual health learning standards mean? What does that mean specifically? I ask every board member and administration to ask their colleague, Ms. Collier, and perhaps even her like-minded running mate, Kurt Morris, this question. As parents and as taxpayers, we deserve to know what it means, and if what is subtly suggested here comes to fruition, what effect that will have on our district and its state funding. I also encourage Ms. Collier and her like-minded friends to consider the fact that unless there's been a massive shift since the last board meeting, 77% of parents who are eligible opted in for the new health family life curriculum. I might run out of time here, but I do want to remind the public and everyone tuning in, patriotism is not defined by the size of a flag. It's defined by an individual's understanding and appreciation for the founding principles of American democracy. In the literal Bill of Rights, we find the separation of church and state to honor the freedom of our deeply personal religious beliefs. Even on the level of our local Sparta Board of Ed, this separation must still apply. The public education system cannot cater to one unique belief system, let alone with reckless abandon for the majority, again, assuming that's what is being suggested. I encourage our board and our administrators to look into these claims and prepare our district for the consequences of this hypothetical, which a sitting board member has now openly proposed. I also encourage everyone listening to attend the candidate forum for the Sparta Board of Ed this Tuesday, October 25th at 7 o'clock. Most of all, I'm almost done, November 8th, please vote. Vote as if our students, our teachers, our district, our bathrooms, and our tax dollars all depend on it.
Thank you, Ms. Gagnon.
Hi, Kate Leonard, 585 West Shore Trail, Sparta.
Hi, Ms. Leonard.
Hi. I'm here tonight because I went to back to school night. This is going to our 5th year at Alpine School for my family. I have a 2nd grader and a 1st grader. We started in preschool. We absolutely love Alpine. Alpine has been wonderful for us. But over the last 5 years, to Kurt's point, I've noticed all the different things that have to be done at Alpine School. Most notably with back to school night, I was disappointed that the kids now have to sit in their seats almost all day because all of the specials are brought to them. They don't have enough classrooms. So the specials teachers don't have their own classrooms. They're using carts. They're going individually to the homerooms. And the kids don't get a chance to just get up, walk to like their next special. In gym, they're not going outside. I understand that the weather is getting very cold out, so maybe the morning classes can't go outside. I don't understand why that affects the kids in the afternoon. These are small children who have lived through 2 years of a pandemic, and they need to get up and they need to move. And that's part of their developmental health. Getting outside is a part of their developmental health, especially at this age. I am wondering when you're going to start building that school, because it definitely is needed. The bathrooms, I was just in the bathroom, the women's teacher's bathroom, literally last week. Mr. Miller allowed me to use it when I was there volunteering, and it's in serious need of repair. And especially if it's going to take 5 years for a new school, they definitely need to update that bathroom for those teachers. They're super hardworking, and they get a lot of crap from everybody. So the least we can do is give them a nice bathroom, right? But I do want to know what you're doing to get a new school. My children are going to leave in just a couple years. They have a niece and nephew who are also there. They're going to be leaving in just a couple of years. So it's not about my
1
own
minute.
family. I want to know what you're going to do for the people of Sparta. We moved here for the school system. 7 years ago, we absolutely love the school system. You guys have been amazing. But Alpine is falling through the cracks, and I want to know what you're going to do about it. Thank you.
Elizabeth Sanchez, 122 Summit Road.
Hi, Ms. Sanchez.
I just wanted to ask about the class rankings. There's been a lot of rumors and, talk going around about what's happening and what has happened. And I was doing a lot of research, and I thought I would look at the board minutes. I didn't see anything in the board minutes. I looked in committee minutes, and I saw that it had been brought up in committee, and that there was a presentation made about class rankings and getting rid of class rankings, and it didn't seem to make it past committee to the full board. But from the rest of my research, I also understand that best practice is kind of getting rid of class rankings, that they seem to hurt the majority of kids in a variety of ways. And so I'm wondering if that discussion will get brought out of committee and maybe brought to the full board, or maybe brought before the public so that we can fully explore that topic. It seems that most of the top schools are getting rid of rankings. It seems that it is beneficial to the vast majority of kids. Having the ranking seems to hurt kids the kids at the very top, the kids in the middle, the kids at it hurts them all in different ways. So I'm hoping that conversation can be brought back, maybe out of committee and brought to the full board and in a public setting so that we can kind of, maybe get that, get that done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Anyone else for public comment number 2? Can I have a motion?
There is one more.
Oop, sorry.
Hi. Jennifer Granite, 22 Longview Road.
Hi, Ms. Grana.
Hi. I wasn't planning on speaking. But I can't not react to the Alpine bathroom question again. And I just wanted to recognize the rest of the board for bringing the board back to what the board is responsible for, which is actually listening to the administrators and giving them what they need for their buildings. Because it's been at least, I could be wrong, at least 4 or 5 years that Mr. Leone and Mr. Miller have been asking for those bathrooms. And it's been about at least 3 years that somebody's been questioning them so acutely. And the bottom line is there have been projects that have been approved that have cost way more than those bathrooms. And there have been staff members that have been not suffering, I don't want to say, but at least seriously uncomfortable with the lack of those bathrooms. The bathrooms in that building are going to improve that building. They're going to increase the value of that building. And I can say personally, as a former board member, going on a tour, I remember talking to Mr. Leone saying, the walkway covering is so much less of a priority, because I can tell you right now, I was all for covering that walkway. You can go back and look at minutes. I was all about covering the walkway. And Mr. Leone looked me right in the face and said, can I tell you something? Forget the walkway, we need bathrooms. So thank you for the rest of the board for approving them and listening to your administrators, because that is actually what the role of the board member is. It's one thing to question something when you think it's too much. Every once in a while, I disagree. It's another thing to harp on something that you know a building administrator desperately needs. So thank you to the rest of the board for fulfilling that request.
Thank you, Ms. Grana. Can I have a motion to close public comment?
Motion.
Oh, is there one more? Sorry. You guys you're not quick enough for me tonight.
Sorry. Frank Sanchez, 122 Summit Road. I was just going
Hi,
to
Mr.
add.
Sanchez.
Hi. I was going to add to what my wife said. I was actually surprised that we still do ranking in a New Jersey affluent or high-performing district. It really hurts your district, your children. I've been an educator for over 20 years. I've worked in some pretty high, prestigious districts. We never ranked. Ranking specifically hurts students. When you have a transcript, it has it by decile. So if you have a student who's ranked 18th, right, in a school district like this, sure, you didn't make the top 10, but that's okay. But now you're in your second decile. Now think about that. In the second decile, ranked 18th, when there's probably, I don't know, the difference between number 9 or 10 and 18th is with the second or third decimal point. And now you're telling that child that they're probably going to be moved out of some pretty selective schools. This is not about giving a participation trophy. You can still have valedictorian. You can still have salutatorian. Honor those incredible achievements. Even have a top 10 dinner. I know that's a tradition here in Sparta. You can still do that without ranking publicly. You can still do that if a student wants to get to West Point or one of our great service academies. They need to know where you are. You can give them that information. You could even do that with scholarships, like the National Merit Scholarship. We mentioned that we have 2 semifinalists. That's a great number. But those 2 students might not even, I don't know who they are, they might not even be in the top 10, and that takes them out of some really select things. It hurts kids. I hope we make a change, and perhaps something you might want to talk about in new business. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Am I safe now? Good. Can I have a motion to close public comment number 2, please?
Motion.
Kurt, thank you. Second?
Second.
Vanessa, thank you. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Just wanted to respond to Ms. Gagnon about the feasibility study, because you brought it up last meeting, you brought it up this meeting. I did find it in between meetings. I did send it over to Mr. Zittimer. It's a long document, and what I wanted to confirm with Mr. Zittimer is that there's nothing in there that could potentially, because it's a facilities, every detail of our facilities, every detail. And I just want to confirm, and he's looking through it, that there's nothing in there that would compromise safety and security. So that's where we are with that, but we're working on it.
It's really not it's not a back and forth. Yeah.
And then, just regarding the class rank and revision, where are we with that? I'll confirm, because it's in the minutes of the committees, that it was discussed in committee. It was presented to committee. We talked about the role of the board. The public talked about the role of the board. One of the only things that is the role of the board is a policy setting. They are policy setting. And any revisions that would take place to anything that is born and set in policy would have to go through the Board of Education. So that discussion began to take place, and as somebody suggested, can we bring it back up? That is something I'll discuss with the policy committee.
All right, thank you. Moving on to the good of the order. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order?
So I have one thing. Mr. Walsh is sitting in the background. We approved him tonight as the new supervisor for math for grades 6 to 12, so congratulations. We're excited, so thank you.
Anyone else?
The season's not over, but I believe the football team, they clinched their division, correct?
I believe they did,
Yeah,
yes.
so-
The season's not over.
Yeah, but I believe they're, win or lose tomorrow, they're division champs, so.
And tomorrow is a big game. Tomorrow's a homecoming game, and it's a Newton game, of course, so big for many reasons. Yeah.
I just wanted to share the following info with the board. I know this isn't the happiest note, but as you may have known, there was an arrest of a local teacher who worked at Pope John, and the prosecutor brought forth charges And as a result of that, I did reach out to Dr. Beck to ensure that this individual was never employed by the Sparta Public Schools. And I want to thank you, Dr. Beck, for getting back to me so quickly to verify that that individual was never employed by our schools, and just to make sure the public is aware of that as well. And if I may, I just want to address, do I have permission just to say anything about what Ms. Agnew said? So I did fill out a survey as someone who does have a professed Christian belief on a question, but I do want to make it clear that in matters of the board, I absolutely show impartiality. There's been a lot of tough votes for me that I always put the students first in terms of that, what's the effect of the students, the staff, and our community. And make no mistake, as if that was misinterpreted, that's really to say that I came forth with ideas that Ms. Rossi and I discussed that I would have preferred to see in our implementation. There was nothing that was said in my statement about repealing or anything like that. It was just modification in terms of maybe how some of the lessons are presented. And I think even with at the number that we have of students opting in and families, I think it's fair to say that there may be changes as we go about this new curriculum and the implementation. And I do trust that that the educators that are teaching it and the administration will bring about changes that might be necessary to our student population, and I would entertain that as well. So I just wanted to say that for the record, that I'm here for all of our students, and certainly that statement was not meant to disparage anybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I guess I'll round it out. And this is said at various points at different meetings, and maybe it's every meeting, but, and I know we know this, but we are truly lucky to be in a district like this. I mean, going through Dr. Beck's superintendent's report and hearing the various accomplishments of our students and our athletic teams and our clubs and our bands, we should all be extremely proud of those accomplishments. One thing we should also be extremely proud of, and unfortunately it was in the face of a tragedy, is our administration and our teachers and our guidance counselors. Because having to fight through what they fought through recently and all coming together as one big family was very, very impressive. And I know we know that, and I think sometimes it gets lost. But I want to make sure that stays at the forefront of everybody's mind, that we are extremely lucky to be in a district like this and have great administrators and great teachers and employees across the board. So thank you all for working through such a difficult situation. We appreciate everything that you all do, so thank you. Moving on to closed session. We will be going to closed session. And let me read my statement here. Whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975, provides for the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances. And whereas the Sparta Township Board of Education is of the opinion that such circumstances exist to discuss attorney-client privilege and land use, which is exempt from the public participation pursuant to New Jersey Public Law 1975, Chapter 231, Open Public Meetings Act. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the Sparta Township Board of Education shall enter executive session on October 20th at 8:35 p.m. The board will reconvene in public session at the conclusion of the executive session. The information discussed during the executive session will be disclosed to the public as soon as it is determined by the board that the information is no longer confidential. No action will be taken, and we expect to be out by probably 9 o'clock. Can I have a motion to enter closed session, please?
Motion.
Kurt, thank you. Second?
Second.
Vanessa, thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
We're going to stay here?